everybody and welcome to Jeff's Baking Blog. Today I'm going to make Sfogliatine Glassate. That's little strips of puff pastry with icing sugar on the top, which has been mixed with some egg white, and then a little pattern of apricot jam piped over that, so that when they bake it creates little panes of icing sugar basically. So before I go on to that, I just need to say happy birthday to Harry for tomorrow, the 17th of March. One of my viewers on my blog and on YouTube actually requested that I give a shout out to Harry for his birthday. So I hope you have a happy birthday, Harry. That's for tomorrow. So these are very light and easy to eat little shards of puff pastry basically. Now I'm going to make my own puff pastry using a rough puff pastry method. You can use shop bought puff pastry if you want to. My problem is that I can't readily buy these days all butter shop bought pastry, and I prefer all butter, so I'm making my own. But if you want to buy a sheet of puff pastry and use that, it will work just fine. So I'll go on to the ingredients, and for this I have 240 grams, which is 1.5 cups plus 1.5 tablespoons of plain flour. That's based on scooping packed flour into a 250 milliliter cup. I have 240 grams, which is 2 sticks plus 1 tablespoon of unsalted butter, which is cold, and I've cut that into cubes. I have 120 milliliters, half a cup of ice cold water, but I probably won't need to use all of that. And I have 6 grams, which is 1 teaspoon of salt. So those are the 4 ingredients I need for the puff pastry. And then for the topping I have 70 grams, which is about half a cup plus 2 tablespoons of icing sugar. And I'm going to use 1 tablespoon, 20 milliliters, or 20 grams, sorry, of egg white. I have 8 grams, 1 tablespoon of plain flour. And in this little piping bag here, I have about 120 grams, 6 tablespoons of apricot jam strained. So it weighs, after straining, it weighs 120 grams. That's to make sure there are no lumps in the jam as I pipe it. So the first thing to do is to make the rough puff pastry. And if you're going to use your own pastry, I'll try to put a note on the video of the time that you can jump to continue without making your own rough puff. So to make the pastry, I'm going to put the flour and the salt into a large bowl. And I'm going to add the butter in as well. And then I'm just going to toss that around a little bit to get those cubes of butter separated and coated in the flour. And at this stage you can squeeze the cubes of butter between your fingers to flatten them out and break them up, or you can cut them in with a knife. But I'm going to use this pastry cutter basically, which I just work it like this, and it cuts the butter into the flour in shards. And I will have to scrape down the cutter, but I want this broken up and mixed into the flour, but still with chunks of butter showing. We're not rubbing this in as if we were making a short crust pastry. So as you can see, that's still quite chunky, some of that butter, and that's fine like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in most of the water, about 6 tablespoons probably to start with, and I'm going to use a knife and I'm just simply going to mix around until it starts to clump together. I'm just to add about another tablespoon. And I think that looks quite good in that state. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my hand to start squeezing it and turning it over to bring it all together into a rough dough with lots of butter still visible. And if I need a little drop more water, I can add more water in. And that's quite good like that. And I've still got about 4 teaspoons of water left there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tip that out onto some plastic wrap, because I'm going to use the plastic wrap to wrap it up in the end and chill it. And I'm going to squeeze it until I got it into a single piece, but I don't want to overwork this. I don't want the butter to be worked all the way through, so I'm going to flatten that just like that, and then I'm going to wrap it up and I'm going to chill it for 30 minutes. And then after 30 minutes, I'm going to roll it out and fold it over a couple of times. Then I'll chill it again. Then I'll roll it out and fold it a few more times. Then it's ready to be used. So I'll come back in 30 minutes when I'm ready to roll this out for the first time. So it's been about 30 minutes and I've taken my dough out of the fridge and I put it onto a floured work surface, and I floured the top as well. And I'm simply going to roll this out into a rectangle which is about 3 times longer than it is wide. And I'll try to keep the sides straight as I do it. And that's good enough like that, basically. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold that over about to the third of the way like that, and then I'm going to end up folding over the other third as well. So I'm just going to level that off like that, and I just brush off any excess flour that wants to come off, and I'm going to fold up the other piece like that, and then I'm going to turn it around and do it again, but first I'm going to put some more flour onto the board. So I turn it so that I have two open ends, one facing me and one facing away from me, and I roll it about the same again. And that's good enough like that. So I'm going to fold it over again. Like that. And I'm actually going to chill mine again now because it's become quite soft. And that's one of the things to remember. If the dough becomes soft, the butter will start to melt. So you can always put it in the fridge for 20 or 30 minutes. So I'm going to put that back into the same piece of plastic wrap basically. Simply wrap it up like that, and I'm going to chill it for another 30 minutes, and then when I come back I'll roll it out 2 more times, and at that stage you can stop. That will be enough layers, but I will actually continue and roll it a further 2 more times to give me more layers, but I'll show you that when I come back. And then at that stage, once it's rolled, it will be ready to be chilled, ready for using on our sfogliatine. So it's been another 30 minutes and I've taken the dough out of the fridge and floured it again, and I'm going to roll it out the same as before. And then I'm going to fold it as I did before as well. And brush off the excess flour and fold it up again. And then I'm going to turn that, reflour the surface, and I'm going to roll it again. Straighten the edges, and I'm going to fold it. Now at this stage you could just wrap that up. You folded it 4 times. You could wrap that up and chill it for at least an hour. 2 hours or longer is better, but at least an hour before using it. But I'm going to roll mine 2 more times just to give me extra layers. And that is my dough rolled. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap that in the plastic wrap again, and I'm going to chill it for 2 hours. Now I already have some already made, so once I've tied it up a little bit, we'll go on, we'll make the icing, roll out our pastry and make our Sfogliatine Glassate. So I have my 20 grams of egg white, and into that I'm going to put my icing sugar, and I'm going to stir that around And that's nicely combined, so I'm going to add my 8 grams of flour in and stir it again. And that's good like that. So I'm going to set that to one side. And I'm going to roll up my rough puff pastry, but I'm simply going to put a little bit of flour onto some parchment paper, and I'm going to roll it out on the parchment paper. This is for ease of use basically. And I have 2 baking trays which I have also lined with parchment paper. So I'm going to lightly flour my dough. I'm going to roll this out to a rectangle, and I want to end up with a rectangle which is about 23 centimetres, 9 inches, maybe slightly more, but about 9 inches by 36 centimetres, which is about 14 inches. But if you have a sheet of puff pastry which is smaller than that, you can still work with that, that's fine. So I'm hoping that this pastry will be about 3 millimeters in thickness, which is roughly 1/4 of an inch. So that's larger than I need, but that's fine. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my icing sugar mixture, and I'm going to put that onto the dough, and I'm going to spread that around until I have it to about that size that I mentioned, 23 by 36. And that is good like that. That's just spread over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to chill that in the fridge, and I'm going to chill it for an hour, and then after an hour I will cut it out into the strips that we need, and at that stage I'll have my oven preheating to 200 Celsius, that's 400 Fahrenheit, and I'll have my baking trays ready as well. So I'll come back in an hour when this is ready to cut into pieces and to have the jam piped on, and then we'll bake them. So I have my oven preheating now, and I've taken the pastry with the icing on out of the fridge, and I'm going to cut it into strips, and I'm going to use this little tool that I've got, and the gap between each is about 1¼ inches, but 1 inch strips would be fine, and you can use something like a pizza wheel if you want to. So I'm simply going to cut all the way up the length, like that, and then I'm going to cut across the width to make strips of about 4 inches. But first of all I'm just going to straighten off the edge at the top, like that, and then a 4-inch strip will be about there. and another 4-inch strip will be about there, and another one can go at about there. So that's good enough like that, and then I need to transfer them onto a baking tray. And with them on the baking trays, I've got my apricot jam, and I'm just going to cut a little hole in the piping bag, and I'm going to pipe the jam. I need that hole slightly larger, I think. Onto them like that, and then I'm going to pipe it across the other way, like that. So I'm going to try to get 4 each way. Like that. So I have my 2 trays there, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 21, 22, 22 of the full size ones. So I'm going to put those into the oven, and I'm going to bake them for between 15 and 20 minutes. They should rise up and bake right the way through in that time. And once they've baked, I'll take them out and leave them for a couple of minutes on the tray. Then I transfer them to a wire rack, and when they've cooled down, I'll come back and show you the results. I baked the Sfogliatine Glassate for 20 minutes, and they rose up quite nicely and baked, and the icing on the top turned a darker colour. So this is what they look like, and they've baked quite nicely, and the little panels have risen up a little bit and come away from the pastry, as they tend to do. And so I've bitten into one just so I can show you the inside. So I'll have a taste of this little piece. Very light, as you would expect with puff pastry, and they're quite small. And you get the sweetness of the sugar and just a little bit of fruitiness from the jam as well. My sister in Canada bought some in a shop, which is where I got the idea for making them from, and she enjoyed them so much, and she dipped hers in her coffee. So that may be how they tend to be eaten in Italy, I don't know. So anyway, it's not a difficult recipe, particularly if you use shop-bought puff pastry. But if you make your own rough puff, as I've done, that's not difficult either. So that's going to be it for this video, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have, please give me a thumbs up below and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen there will be an eye that you can click on, and that will take you to a link for the recipe, and I'll put a link below the video. And I'll be back with another recipe in the very near future. So until then, happy baking.